of the NFL draft after months of preparation, months of talking back and forth. How many mock drafts, Alex, did we do? 6, 7 live Patriots mock drafts?
Something like that, yeah.
There's a big number. We are finally here. And this feels to me like I can't even describe it. The amount of work and the amount of shows and the amount of talking and all of these things that we've done about the draft and the lead up to it, to finally have it be here tonight. It is a great feeling to figure out what's going to happen in one of the most uncertain, wacky drafts that I can remember. And my memory doesn't go back that far. Other people's memories go back even further than mine, but you hear consistently how bizarre and wonky of a draft this is, with really no consensus at the top, really no quarterbacks at the top, and it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to see a lot of movement, I think, in this draft as well. But it's finally here, Alex, and this is like our Super Bowl. I think it's safe to say that this is kind of our Super Bowl. Like, this is what it's all about for us, and we're jacked up for it. I know I am, at least.
People ask me this, because the joke I like to make every year during the Super Bowl is people talk about how, oh, the Grammys are my Super Bowl, the election's my Super Bowl. No, the Super Bowl is my Super Bowl. I'm pretty proud of that. This is probably I still like the Super Bowl better. This is my second favorite day, or I guess in terms of a weekend, it doesn't get much better than this. I think it's March Madness weekend and then the NFL draft are the two best weekends in sports, and kind of for the same reason. We have no idea what's about to happen, and it's going to be nuts. And there's going to be heroes and there's going to be goats. And I don't mean that in a good way, right? There's going to be people that get memed into oblivion, things like that. It's good. Like the culture of the sport itself will change in the next 72 hours. And I love the excitement and all of that. I did get indirectly, I don't know if you saw the video. I think I sent it to you, that it's a comedy Twitter account, Corked Bats, put up about the mock draft guys the other day. Yeah. It is harsh, but it's fair. It's very fair. I just think, again, it's the reason I love this time of year. It's all promise. It's all ahead of you. It's all potential.
Right.
It's tough, and people find ways, but it's tough to be negative about it. We're going to enjoy the next couple of days. It's all about the future. It's all about what's next. So
yeah,
it's going to be fun, and hopefully we get at least a couple things right here.
I think that's the biggest thing that I like about the draft so much, is that unless the Patriots do something that we all really universally get behind and dislike, 9 times out of 10 that doesn't happen. And most of the time there's a player that they pick at the top of the draft and then the rest of the draft, all 3 days, where you can sink into it and say, I see some potential with this guy, right? Maybe they get something out of this guy. And there's no easier way to improve your roster than improving your roster through the draft. And I think that that's the biggest thing that still stands out, despite all of the free agency spending, despite all the wide receiver movement, not here in New England necessarily, but that we've seen across the league. When it all boils down to ultimately is that the draft is still the best way to find talent and the best way to get better as a team through 3 days. And with a team like the Patriots, there are just so many different avenues that they can go in at the top of the draft. So I think we need to discuss all of those things. I also want to discuss some of the rumor mill that's come out today, not just about the Patriots, but also about some of the other teams wanting to move down. But let's start with the Pats. And I think the biggest piece of information, and we always take information this time of year with a giant grain of salt. We know that these leaks are very seldom out of Patriot Place itself, and it's also pretty rare that we see any sort of Patriots information come out from any direction. But yesterday, it was Matt Miller, ESPN Matt Miller, who tweeted that a source in the league said that Quay Walker from Georgia is not going to get past the Patriots at 21. That has spearheaded a lot of mock drafters, even some of the more accurate mock drafters out there, to put Quay Walker to the Patriots at 21. Whether it's Quay Walker or a linebacker in general, you can answer either one of these questions, Alex. How sure are you or confident are you that the Patriots are going in that direction, Quay Walker or linebacker specifically?
I think pretty high, just because it would be so hard for them not to pick a linebacker. Are you talking about a 21 or overall? Like in the
just
first
with their top pick in the draft, whatever you want to put it at that.
So I think I would say within the top 50, I think they'll get a linebacker. I'm not totally sold it's tonight. I could still see them going left tackle tonight. I could still see them going corner or Daxton Hill tonight. But again, when you look at that class, even beyond Walker, and I do think Walker's the stud. And as I go through this the last couple of days, I really think Quay Walker's LB1 in this class. I really do. I know people like Devin Lloyd. I know people like Nakobe Dean. There's a lot to like. There is. I think Quay Walker's the best linebacker in this draft. But even going beyond that, Chad Muma, Leo Chenal, Troy Anderson, and now here we are an hour before the draft. I can't do names. There's just so many talented guys in that top. In that top 60-ish range for the Patriots. And it's such a need. They would it's almost like they're sending a message if they don't take somebody, right? If they don't take somebody, a linebacker in that top 50, I think that's a sign that we're going back to that 2020 defense where it was one linebacker that played about 60% of the time, and that's it, right? Everybody else was very, very situationally specific. So again, I think at 21, it's in play. I would say probably most likely 20 or their first pick, I think linebacker. But if I had to put a percentage on it, like 35, 40, I'm not more confident than not about any position with the first pick, but I do feel very, very confident that they're going to come away with a linebacker in the top, let's call it the top 2 rounds.
Yeah, it just feels like one of those drafts that is too deep at linebacker to not walk away with one of these guys. And
at the same time,
positions we've
said that about wide receiver the last 2 years, and no disrespect to Trey Nixon, but the only player they have to show for it is Trey Nixon.
Yeah, I just feel like when I look at Bill Belichick and the way that he has historically built his defenses, Teddy Bruschi, Gerard Mayo, Dante Hightower, right? You can see that passing of the torch and that succession plan at that inside linebacker position. And I also think when you look at everything that you hear kind of across the league, no one actually knows what the Patriots are going to do with this pick, but just asking around about it, a lot of people have this notion of who wouldn't want to have somebody from this Georgia defense on their team, right? This Georgia defense from top to bottom was built with Avengers level athleticism, guys that were buying into the program and buying into the coaching. Their coaching is a very nice translation, I guess is the way to put it, to what the Patriots do. They are not a team that is all about me. They're not a team. A lot of these guys, like Trayvon Walker might be the top pick in the draft tonight. Trayvon Walker could have had 15 sacks playing for a different school. But that's not what they asked him to do at Georgia. Jordan Davis was a situational player at Georgia because they had interior pass rushers that they brought onto the field and had him off the field. At other programs, Jordan Davis isn't coming off the field in those situations. Devontae Wyatt, a guy that's really a penetrating 3 technique, parking in gaps. Quay Walker is an athletic freak that they have immediately told teams that they have held this bunch back for the betterment of the entire team, for the greater good of the cause of winning a national championship. Doesn't that just feel, on top of the fact that all these guys are super athletic and can run like the wind, which is certainly something the Patriots need, that buy-in and that want to buy in for the greater good of a championship sounds so much like what the Patriots want to build here in Foxborough and do build and Foxborough every single year. So I think there is this gravitas of the Georgia defense of just wanting one of those dogs, right? And I mean bulldogs, like wanting one of those guys in the building. And Quay Walker, for so many reasons, his size measures out closer to what they're used to. He's an athletic guy. He does have some processing or some seasoning to do, especially in coverage, but they can work those things out and they can develop him in that regard. So I think the succession plan at that position makes a lot of sense. Now, a lot of mock drafters before, maybe yesterday or the day before that, when all this Quay Walker stuff really started to come out of nowhere, we're talking about Devin Lloyd in that spot. And I think you can make a lot of the same arguments for Devin Lloyd that I just made for Quay Walker in terms of his athleticism and in terms of his ability to play sideline to sideline. But all of a sudden, it does feel like the Devin Lloyd steam has lessened and the Quay Walker train is now moving at full force. What is your read on Devin Lloyd and why maybe people have moved off of him a little bit compared to Quay Walker?
Well, I think it may honestly be pretty simple, Evan, and it's something that we've talked about before. And you know, I know this is going to sound like a joke. I'm serious. Quay Walker played in the SEC. Devin Lloyd played not just in the Pac-12, in the Pac-12 South.
I went on that. That was a long time ago at this point that I went on the Pac-12.
Your anti-SEC Pac-12. Pac-12 has no speed rant. That was a good one.
Yeah.
That you know, it's a big difference. It really is. The conferences have gotten so spread. And I think it's the SEC. I think it's the Big 10, the Big 12, and then the ACC and the Pac-12 are kind of that next tier. Right. Teams are going to look at that, especially a guy when you're taking a player that high. You know, we talk about we're talking about the adjustment level for guys coming from non-Power 5 schools, guys coming from the FCS level. The talent spread, especially now with some of the NIL stuff, and this is more projecting forward, but you're starting to see it. The talent spread is there. It's a bigger jump to go from the Pac-12 to the NFL than it is to go from the SEC to the NFL. That's just the reality of it. And I think if you're taking a linebacker that high, that guy's going to play right away. And I think people see Quay Walker as more NFL ready. Devin Lloyd may have more upside. You hear the talk, oh, he's this year's Micah Parsons. That's the other thing. I think we all got caught up in whoever it was. I don't even remember. It's like a bad game of telephone. One person said one time early on that Devin Lloyd was the next Micah Parsons. I don't think anybody saw it, but it's a copycat league, and all of a sudden this guy's a potential top 15 pick, right? Right. And I think that wave has just kind of come over. This is another thing about the draft that's really interesting to me. The storylines are kind of objective, right? We're doing the draft tonight in this weekend. Why? If we had done the draft 2 weeks ago, how different would the board look, right? If we had done it, and that's what they used to do immediately after pro days. If we had done the draft 2 weeks ago, I don't think we were talking about Trayvon Walker as 1-1 yet. Yeah. And ultimately, that all comes from inside the rooms. Did these 2 weeks ultimately decide Trayvon Walker going 1-1? If we waited another 2 weeks, if we did the draft in mid-May, would Trayvon Walker go 1-1? Would we be on to the next guy, right? Would Chad Muma or Christian Harris be the top linebacker on the board?
Move on to the next guy, but to be honest with you, I think the NFL's board is pretty set. Like, I don't think that there is significant movement within the league. I think it's more of a media thing that we move around guys as much as we do.
So I think there's movement. There's movement up until the pro days, which generally run through the first or the middle of the second week in April, right? So that was about 2 weeks ago now, 2.5 weeks ago now. There's movement up until that point. After then, I agree. I think the NFL boards are set. Yeah. But you start to hear stuff trickle out in the media and it gets wilder. Maybe things are delayed. But that's a whole part of it is like people also, as Felger and Mass like to say, you got to do a show today. You need stuff to talk about if you're draft people. Yeah. We did this last year. Could Justin Fields go first overall? Are we overrating Trevor Lawrence? Like, do people believe that? Or is it just a point of conversation because it's been however many months and need something to talk about? Is Jordan Stout better than Matt Araiza? Do you actually think that? Or are you just looking for a talking point here on day 100-something of the pre-draft process? Like, I think you got to try to sift through all of that. I think some of the linebacker discussion right now is a lot of that.
So I want to go back to Devin Lloyd for a second. I have heard that Devin Lloyd has a injury red flag on his knee that teams are a little bit concerned about, not necessarily that he's not going to play or he's going to start on the PUP list or anything like that, but more so about his longevity in the league and how long he's going to be able to last. These are the things that have come out this time of year around the draft is, okay, well, this guy's got maybe some bone-on-bone cartilage issue in his knee. How long is he going to be a 10-year pro? Or is he only going to be a 6 to 8 year pro, right? We talked about a lot of this stuff with Sony Michel. But I think the difference is with Devin Lloyd, because you look at them on paper, they're almost a carbon copy of one another. Like, they're exactly the same size. for the most part, I use Mock Draftable a lot for size measurements and comparisons. They have Quay Walker as an 82% match for Devin Lloyd, just from a raw measurable standpoint, right? Like height, weight, length, that sort of thing. So they're basically, from a measurables athletic profile, very, very similar. But there's one key difference. Devin Lloyd ran a 4.66 and Quay Walker ran a 4.52. And when you turn on the tape, that speed is right there. It's palpable. You see it right on the film that Quay Walker is a faster linebacker than Devin Lloyd is. Now, I think Devin Lloyd is better at rushing the passer specifically at this point, I would say, than Quay Walker. And you mentioned some of those Micah Parsons comparisons. I think that's where they come from, is Devin Lloyd's ability to play on the line of scrimmage and play on the end of the line of scrimmage and rush the quarterback. Quay Walker did that at times, and he did that a little bit at Georgia, but not exactly the same, right? It's not exactly with the same type of production, I guess is the word. So I think that there's an argument there, certainly between those two guys, but I'm with you. SEC speed all favors Quay Walker. And I think that's where it's going to end up being for the Patriots too. It sounds like is that they're going to maybe have Quay Walker ahead of Devin Lloyd. We'll see in the long run if they end up being right. I personally, just based off of film evaluation, have Devin Lloyd ahead of Quay Walker in my rankings. But maybe they see it differently, as they often do. So that'll be interesting to see here tonight. That seems to be where the winds are blowing with the Patriots towards linebacker. I want to talk about some of these potential trades as well that we keep hearing about, Alex. A lot of movement potentially on this board, especially it sounds like when the Commanders come on the clock. I think they're at 11, right, in the draft. That's sort of when the wild, wild west is projected to begin. There's teams that are trying to move up in the draft. You have the Saints, you have the Eagles that have those two picks in basically in the span of 3 or 4 picks there. They might package those together. Green Bay, all the way from at 22 and 28, could package those picks to move up in the draft. Dallas has had some rumors for weeks now. Jerry Jones, I think, flat out came out and said it publicly that he would like to move up in the draft and
Jerry Jones is Jerry Jones.
Yeah, target somebody higher. And then also this morning too, Houston was apparently discussing both avenues, either not with their first pick. They're going to pick at 3, but at 13.
As they should.
Yeah, at 13, they've discussed moving up back into the top 10 from 13 to get their guy, or moving back away from 13 down the board if potentially their guy is already off the board and they don't have a deal in place to move up. So all of this, I think ultimately with the Eagles, with Dallas, with Green Bay, I think these teams are definitely looking for wide receivers, which I think it is interesting from a Patriots perspective how exactly that's all going to shake out. But my bigger question about it is not necessarily about the wide receivers. It's, could the Patriots be a part of facilitating one of these moves up the board? I know it's not maybe the huge jump that Jerry Jones wants to go from 24 to 21, or the Green Bay wants going from 22 to 21 or 28 to 21, but that they could be a part of helping a team move up the board ultimately, because we know that the Patriots have floated out there and through the reports and through the grapevine, Mike Reese has thrown out there a bunch that they would have ideally like to move back. So could the Patriots potentially be involved with one of these teams to help facilitate a move up the board for somebody?
Yeah, I think they're going to be looking for it. I don't think they're in a spot where they're locked in to 21. Like, they're going to pick up the phone pending a monumental fall. And that's not extreme. I think there's very few instances where a team says, don't even answer the phone, we're making the pick. That's in this draft, that's Jordan Davis, that's Jameson Williams, which both those guys are on top 15. I think you could argue Chris Olave would fall in that category. We don't know how they feel about that. I would not pick up the phone if Chris Olave were on the board. I think they'll look at it. And the reason why, and there's a comment there, and I think it's good to address, that moving back from 21 to 24 would be pointless. Well, let's say that Treylon Burks is the last of the top receivers on the board. And Treylon Burks isn't a fit for the Patriots, right? Or let's say that 18, 19, 20, somewhere in there, right? One of the guards goes, Zion Johnson or Kenyon Green. All of a sudden, Dallas at 24, they either want Treylon Burks, they want that last receiver, or they want the other guard, right? They want to make sure they get that guy. Those are two picks I think would make a ton of sense. If you're the Patriots, you can get them to overpay if the board falls your way. And Dallas, I think it's 88 is their third round pick. If you add an extra top 100 pick, the way this draft is stacked up, like I have the consensus big board in front of me here, it's pointless to move back to. So if you're saying it's pointless to move back to from 21 to 24, the players you're potentially adding if you make a move like that. So here's who's expected to go in that range. Instead of getting a shot at one of these guys, you get a shot at two. Troy Anderson, Channing Tindall, Myjai Sanders, Ngabare. Is it Ngabare from South Carolina, the edge rusher?
Kingsley Ngabare.
Wan'Dale Robinson, Sam Williams, Kobe Bryant, Marcus Jones, Nick Cross, Khalil Shakir is in there, James Cook. So that's like the 80 to 100 range, right?
Right.
If you getting one of those guys would be great. I think, and they all have a shot. They have the pick at 85, right? If they can add two of those guys and they move back 3 spots and they still get the guy they want anyway, it's great. So I don't think if you now look, if they trade 21 for 24 and like 140, yeah, that's kind of pointless.
Right.
If they add a top 100 pick, which they really should be able to do, moving back, I don't think they're going further than 24 or sooner, right? They're not going 22 or 23.
Right.
If they move back to 24 and they can add a top 100 pick, that's great. And any further back, I think you're definitely going to add a top 100 pick. And then the one other, and Evan, I think you know where I'm going with this. The one other wild card, this is something I started exploring kind of late. If Chris Olave falls, let's say the Patriots don't like Chris Olave.
Yeah.
And I think they should, but I'm not in that room. I think there's a really good chance, and you've kind of heard whispers of this, that the Chicago Bears, who do not have a first-round pick, they traded it to the Giants last year for Justin Fields. There's rumors that the Bears are going to try to move up in the first and get Chris Olave and pair him with Justin Fields. They were college teammates at Ohio State. If you could get, I think the Bears' first pick is 39. If you can get like 39, I think 77 is their third, and this works. This is what the deal would be. 39, 77 in next year's first round pick from Chicago. I don't care if they had Chris Olave. They're going to suck next year. That's the only scenario where I think they trade, where it would be maybe okay trading out of the first. Yeah. But I think they're going to be open for business.
Yeah, so I think to go back to one of the original things you said, the biggest thing is you have to remember, if the Patriots are, if another team, let's take the Patriots out of it for a second, if another team like Green Bay, Dallas, Kansas City is another team that I think could get into this trade up sweepstakes, they are trading up to target a specific player, right? So they're looking at it, and that 21st pick is essentially, let's just use this as an example, use Treylon Burks. It's a good example. That 21st pick could become the pick where Treylon Burks is going. Somebody is going to get Treylon Burks at 21. Now, if you have 3 teams, Dallas, Green Bay, Kansas City, that all want Treylon Burks, you can create a bidding war where moving to 21 to 24, you might get that extra top 100 pick because Dallas has to outbid the other 2 teams to make it worth their while. So I think moving back from 21 to 24, it could have plenty of value for the Patriots. So
the other thing is, sorry to cut in, we don't know what the quarterback board is going to look like.
Right.
Let's say Carolina picks a quarterback at 6, and then Pittsburgh takes a quarterback at 20.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, there's a team that was planning on taking their quarterback in the second round. We're not going to get our guy now. We got to move up.
Right.
And then and then you're really in the driver's seat. If you're the Patriots, you could really ask for a line because you'll know, right? You'll more or less know if a team's moving up. They're not going to tell you, but if it's Detroit moving up from 32, right? If it's let's say Carolina doesn't take a quarterback at 6, they're trying to get back up in the first. You probably know what that is for a guy like Desmond Ridder, right? Something like that. Patriots fans should want as many quarterbacks to go, not as many to go before them as possible. All of however many good quarterbacks you think there are in this draft, 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, that many minus 1. That's how many quarterbacks you want to go in the top 20, because then one team is going to freak out and maybe you can dangle that 21st pick and say, here's your last shot to get your quarterback. Time to pay up.
When I look at Detroit, this is a team that I've also, in a lot of my mock drafts and a lot of our mock drafts, we've tried to facilitate a trade with the Lions are picking 32 and 34. And assuming that
Yep.
they want a quarterback with one of those picks, but even if they don't, I would think that they could probably get the player at 34 that they want at 32. There's only one pick in between, right? So for Detroit, I look at it and say, well, maybe you should be more aggressive and try to trade up, because having 2 picks in a 3-pick span, when there's probably only one guy that you really love in that range, anyways, you're probably just going to get that guy at 34. So unless you really truly believe that there's 2 guys in that spot that you like, then maybe that changes things. But I look at Pittsburgh at 20, one spot ahead of the Patriots. The Steelers are going to take a quarterback. I think ideally they would love it to be. They would love it to be Malik Willis. I don't know if Malik Willis will make it to them at 20. They could move up a little bit to take Malik Willis, but that seems to be the guy that they are targeting. I also can see the Kenny Pickett angles as well, staying in Pittsburgh, and the local kid sort of, and that whole story could make a lot of sense too. But once you get the quarterback off the board to Pittsburgh, and ultimately, I do think that's going to be the first quarterback to go, is whatever quarterback the Steelers take. I don't see Carolina taking a quarterback. Seattle's basically already said they're out on quarterbacks. Maybe the Saints could get into the quarterback thing, but that's a smart organization, and this just isn't a very good quarterback class. And I just don't really see Mickey Loomis and Dennis Allen taking one of these quarterbacks this year. It just, they've won a lot of games with Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston and all these guys, right? Like, they don't necessarily need to reach on a quarterback. So I look at Pittsburgh. I see that as probably the first team, or where the buck stops with the quarterbacks. So then if you're one of those teams that wants to get Ritter or wants to get Pickett, 21's the spot. That becomes the spot. I think that's best case scenario to me for the Patriots, is that hopefully they get that pick to auction it off to either the highest bidder for a wide receiver or the highest bidder for a quarterback. Those are, I think, the 2 things that I would look at with them. And ultimately, I think that's where it will end up going here tonight. All right, let's look at some of we have some graphics here, some cool graphics. I want to pull some of these up. So I want you to tell me, Alex, how wrong I am about some of these things. Let's go with my top 5 in general. This is from my big board. And this is my top 5 players in general for the Patriots here. Obviously, I think
3 of those guys aren't going to be on the board.
Okay, well, this is the you don't know that. You want to?
Okay, the top 2.
Sure? You're 100% sure.
The top 2 most definitely not.
100% sure.
If Jordan Davis falls out of the top 15, there's at least 10 NFL GMs that should be fired before round 2.
If we go back to the 2004 draft, I guarantee you that a lot of people just like yourself said the same exact thing about Vince Wilfork. I guarantee.
I get like
crazier things have happened.
Guess.
All right, so out of these guys though, who do you feel is like the most realistic one? Because obviously you think that the board is crazy. And we also, the top 5 is always a little bit like this, but 6 through 10 was probably a more accurate representation of where they could be at. But anyways,
okay, Devin, if Devin Lloyd's on the, I feel like they'd pass it on Devin Lloyd, because if Lloyd's on the board at 21, either Walker's gone, and that, like, I just think at that point, if Devin Lloyd and Quay Walker both on the board, they're going to take Quay Walker. If Quay Walker's gone off the board, I think they're going to like the second-round linebackers more than Lloyd. I don't think they're going to have a grade on Lloyd. They haven't drafted from the Pac-12 a lot in recent years. They haven't had success when they do. Their draft picks since the Pac-10 became the Pac-12 are not good. Pac-10, they hit a bunch. Rob Gronkowski played in the Pac-10. He didn't play in the Pac-12. I think Olave, all things considered, look, I think Jameson Williams is better. I think Jameson Williams is the best wide receiver in this draft. He's not going to be, I would be shocked if he's on the board. I think he's going to surprise everybody and go in the top 10. I think Chris Olave would be one of, if not the best case scenarios for the Patriots in this draft, if they could walk away with him at 21. Not just that he's talented, he is, but we've talked about this for years. A big part of the problem with N'Keal Harry was not necessarily that N'Keal Harry was a bad football player. He wasn't a fit What they were asking him to do were not things he did well. And the things he
Right.
did well, they weren't asking him to do. Chris Olave is the exact opposite of that. I think Chris Olave is tailor-made to play in the Patriots offense.
Yeah.
And the learning curve would be so minimal that I don't think we'd really have to worry a ton about them developing him, right? Because I think he's pretty much where he needs to be to be an impact player for the Patriots. So I think Williams and Davis are off the board. Even though we screwed it up the other night, I think Johnson's off the board. I just don't see Devin Lloyd being their guy the way they operate. I think if they're going to go linebacker there, it's going to be Walker. And if Walker's off the board, they'll do the value thing and go to day 2. I don't think Chris Olave is on the board either. I think the Bears are going to pay a ton to move up and get him, like in the top 20. But if they can land Chris Olave, good job. Good job. Well done. We move on to day 2. There's a couple other needs, but that's a great pick.
So ultimately, I think that Devin Lloyd will end up being the answer to this statement I'm about to make. I think one of these guys will be there at 21 tonight. It's probably going to end up being
I highly doubt all 5 would be gone. I agree with you on that. I think you're right. Devin Lloyd's the most likely to be on the board.
Yeah, I'm with you that Devin Lloyd does feel a little bit. I've been back and forth. I've been waffling with Devin Lloyd. I think that he's got great playmaking traits. You see some of those sideline to sideline plays. You see some of those really good plays in coverage, the pass rush ability as well. And that versatility to play on and off the line of scrimmage feels very Patriot-like. Like he's a chess piece type of player. Third downs, you put him on the line of scrimmage, you have him rush the passer, a lot like Dante Hightower in that type of way. But at the same time, his ability to play in the box, navigate the box, take on blocks, take the best path to the football. Those are some of the things that don't really go as well for Devin Lloyd in terms of his translation to the Patriots. So I'm not as high on Devin Lloyd either. To me, the guy, if you have to make one of these things happen, to me, it's the third guy on the list. It's Chris Olave. Jameson Williams, it sounds like, I think his absolute floor at this point is probably at maybe the first time the Eagles come on the clock, right? And they're very lucky if they don't have to trade up and move up to get him. I think he's probably going to end up going. I think his ceiling is probably the Giants with that second pick that they have in the top 10. I think they're picking 7th, 5th, and 7th, I think it is. 7th sounds like a nice spot for Jameson Williams to the Giants. So I'm with you that one's probably off the board. Jordan Davis, I think, is so interesting. I texted you about this earlier today. In a draft that's so uncertain at the top, where you're taking some risk, like taking Trayvon Walker 1-1 is a risk. Like I think that the traits are there, but it's a real risk that they're going to project that into the NFL, and he's going to all of a sudden go from 9 sacks in college to 19 in the season in the NFL, right? I mean, that's a huge leap for somebody like Trayvon Walker. The safest player in this draft to me is Jordan Davis, and maybe it's Evan Neal. I think he's probably pretty safe as well, or Ike Ekwonu from North Carolina State, if you want to go offensive line. But on defense and on the defensive line, there's just not I don't see a path that Jordan Davis isn't a 10-year pro. Like, even if he's not an all-pro level player, and obviously this is injuries aside, anybody could get hurt. So injuries I throw out the door.
Naturally.
I don't see how Jordan Davis at 340 pounds and the way that he moves is not a regular NFL starter for 10 plus years. Like, it just doesn't add up to me that anything else could possibly happen. Yeah, maybe he's ultimately never better than like a Linval Joseph, like a really good nose tackle, but he's going to be a really good nose tackle for a really long time in the league.
So I was talking to somebody about this earlier. I think with Jordan Davis, and again, this is the external view of it and why maybe Jordan Davis is projected where he is. Again, I think he's a top 10 talent. I really do. I think he's going to change the league. I think he's going to change the way teams view the defensive line. I think, make yourself big. That's cool. Evan Lazar's show. I think externally, a lot of people, even some experts, and I'm guilty of this at times, I'm not excluded from this. I think people lean heavily on player comps. I think they do, because it just makes it so easy, right? You can visualize it. Oh, this guy is like this player. Well, this player did this. So yeah, it makes sense. There is no player comp for Jordan Davis. You can say Fletcher Cox. You can say J.J. Watt. You can say Vince Wilfork.
I can see some of the Fletcher Cox. I think you have to go back. Like, I think the problem is that we didn't see we are not old enough to see Jordan Davis, right? Like Jordan Davis, I think in a lot of ways is like some of the guys that used to play 20, 30
No,
years ago.
but he's not, because this was talked about after the combine. The combination of size and speed has just never come across
Yeah,
before.
that's absolutely fair.
And I think without that comp, it's very hard, without getting into the real nitty-gritty of X's and O's in the tape, to properly express the potential Jordan Davis has, how dominant he can truly be in this league. We're just going to have to see it.
Yeah.
And I think that's gotten kind of lost in translation, especially if you don't watch college football. He's in the trenches. Even if you're watching Georgia, you don't necessarily have an eye on him unless you're making a point to do it. As somebody who watched a lot of college football this year, he changes games. He's playing in the SEC. He's playing on a defense with multiple first-round picks, won a national championship. Even on the scale of all of that, and, Trayvon Walker is going to go 1-1. We're talking about Quay Walker moving up into the first round. Some of these other guys. There's 2 players on that defense who aren't in this draft who are going to go in the top 10 next year. All that considered, Jordan Davis was a man among boys on that defense.
Yeah.
He's gonna change the league. I don't think it's, he's going to come in and play 10 years. I think that's his floor. I think his ceiling is next year.
That's my point. Is that's his floor?
Well, no,
and in the draft where everybody's taking chances, like that's such an easy pick to make.
He
right?
has
his floor is a 10-year pro and a stud nose tackle. His ceiling
what
is
you're
like
saying,
the best player in the league, right? Like
it is. No, you're not exaggerating. He could be the best defensive player in the league,
right?
And I think that he has the highest upside of any player in this draft.
Yeah,
I really do. I think he could be, and now he's a defensive tackle, so it's a little different. I think he could be the best, the most upside in this draft. And I was going to say something else about him. Oh, we were talking about this before, right? Micah Parsons, copycat league. I think at this time next year, you're going to see a bunch of random defensive tackles all projected to go in the middle of the first round because everybody's, the next Jordan Davis. We got to get the next Jordan Davis. Who's the next Jordan Davis?
Jalen Carter might be the next Jordan Davis.
I think for the next 4 or 5 years, we're going to be hearing every year around the draft, well, you got to get the next Jordan Davis. And I'll tell you this, there's not going to be a next Jordan Davis for a long time. The dude is special. The dude is different. Okay. This league has not seen anybody like him before.
We both love Jordan Davis. I want to talk about 2 more positions. We talked linebacker. We talked my top 5. Look, you can't look at the Patriots and ignore corner, right? Like corner is a glaring need on their roster. Now, the one reason why I've kind of come off corner in the first round, Alex, is because a lot of the time the Patriots are a second-round corner team, right? They're a second-round defensive back team in general. I think Devin McCourty, Brandon Merriweather, I think, are the 2 only DBs that they've ever drafted in the first round under Belichick.
Brandon Merriweather a first-round pick?
He was. And both of those guys are safeties, right? So they don't really draft corner early.
They drafted Devin as a corner. I don't think the plan was to move him to safety.
No, maybe not until after his second year. Regardless, though, here's my corner board for the Patriots. I think you're looking at those top 4 guys there, Booth, McDuffie, Elam, Gordon, as potential guys that they could pick tonight if they do want to go in the direction of corner. Who's your guy out of this group? Because this group in particular, I would say a lot of flavors here, right? Like this is like, you go to Baskin Robbins, which one do you want? Like which ice cream do you want? Because all these guys are very, very different in how they play. Their strengths and weaknesses are pretty different. Andrew Booth Jr. is number 1 on my list. I think he has the highest upside out of this group, but I can be talked into any of those 4 guys. Which one's your guy here?
Well, first off, not on the list, nor should he be, but Derek Stingley's the best corner in this draft. I like Sauce Gardner.
He's going number 3 to Houston.
I'm glad that that's been sorted out. I just want to slip that in there.
Yeah.
We don't have enough information to answer this question. And I know I'm copping out, but is it really going to be a positionless secondary, or are they looking for the big outside press man corner to add to the group that they have? If they're going positionless, I want McDuffie because he's the best fit for that kind of defense. If they want the big outside guy, I was an Andrew Booth guy for most of this process. I think I'm actually shifting towards Elam. I think Booth has a slightly higher ceiling, but I think Elam's a better player right now, which they need, and I think it's close enough. I think the ceilings are close enough that I'd rather the more sure thing. And I think this is the hardest position to project. I don't think there's such an outside of maybe quarterback. I don't think there's such a thing as a sure thing corner in the NFL draft, but I feel slightly better about Elam than Booth in the 2-year projection. 5-year projection, I like Booth better, but I think it's close. This guy's going to need to play. He's going to need to play a lot. Give me the guy who's more polished. Give me the guy who's better right now. I also like the idea of doubling up. I think they should take multiple corners. And you're 6, 7, 8 right there, Evan. Give me one of those guys. Give me one of those guys. I think they will turn whoever that is into a player. I really do. And I don't think any of those guys are 80, 90% snap guys year one, which is what they need. And look, maybe they figure out another way to do that and they double up further down. But give me one of those three. I would love to see one of those three guys here because that's what they need, athletes. That's ultimately what they need. They need athletes. Woolen, Jones, McCollum kind of is a little bit of both, but Woolen and Jones might be the two best athletes at this position in the draft. Woolen might be the best athlete in the draft, period, full stop. I was raving about Jordan Davis's upside. Woolen's up there too.
McCollum tested better overall than Tyreek Woolen, just full disclosure.
So he's not 6'4" with 35 inch arms.
He's 6'1".
Yeah, I'm factoring in Evan.
He ran a 6'4" 3-cone, Alex. 6'4", 39.5-inch vertical, 4.33 in the 40-yard dash. I mean, he had the best combine workout for a corner in the history of the combine.
6'4". If you're 6'4" and you're running a 4.2, there's no mismatch if you can figure things out.
Right, but you have to be able to change directions, right? And I think that's the difference.
Well, but I don't think that's an athleticism thing. I think that's he's never really had to do that before, kind of thing. So it's like Woolen's upside's tremendously high. Unlike Jordan Davis, I think there's a chance he just doesn't pan out, right? And you lose on the pick. So that's why he's a second or third round pick, not a first round pick. But I think Tariq Woolen's upside is tremendous.
So, yeah, I'm with you. So I have Andrew Booth Jr. as number one. I think there's two angles of this that do not scream Patriots. One is the lack of tape or just a lack of reps. He only played 15 experience. Thank you. He only played 15 college games, right? And when you look at his snap count, very low snap count, dealt with injuries, things like that. The second thing is that little paw next to his name. You can't ignore the fact that he went to Clemson. And there's something about Clemson that Bill Belichick, it's something about Dabo Swinney that Bill Belichick has stayed away from in the past. All the talent to come through that school in 20 plus years to never draft somebody out of Clemson, that's kind of remarkable, right? That's a standout thing. That's something that we have to discuss. So Andrew Booth Jr., I think talent-wise, has the highest upside of any of the guys in this group because of his explosiveness. He's an explosive athlete. He's got explosive closing speed. He's got great ball skills down the field. He is a true ball hawking dog. Like, he can go out there and make some real plays on the football. If they want to go with the heady, instinctual, high IQ, good athletes, good open field tacklers, like, in a lot of ways, the Washington guys are kind of like the Devin McCourtys of the world, right? Like, Trent McDuffie and Kyler Gordon are not the sexiest coverage guys. That's definitely more like a guy like Booth. But in terms of just open field tackling ability and limiting yards after the catch, my hesitation with McDuffie is, according to PFF, his average depth of target face was 8.8 yards. He faced something like six. He faced something like 6 passes of 20 plus yards down the field the entire season, playing as a regular player in that defense, right? A starter, a guy that played a ton of snaps. So I look at that and I have concerns about, it doesn't necessarily mean he can't, but we haven't necessarily seen him play the football down the field. So as much as we want to say, oh, he's a great matchup guy for Tyreek Hill or he's a great matchup guy for Jalen Waddle, well, those guys win on verticals, right? So what happens when the football is in the air and it's either Trent McDuffie's knocking it away or Tyreek Hill is running an 80-yard touchdown? I have a little bit of hesitations there. Kaiir Elam, like you said, Alex, if they're going to go with that press man, a physical outside corner, he definitely fits the mold. He has long speed. He has that ability to ride and bump and grind down the field. I think the issue that you have with Kaiir Elam is a little bit of hip stiffness. And that's, I think, something that I've saw on tape a lot. And I don't think the 40 time of the sub 4.4, that doesn't go away just because he ran a fast 40. he has issues with hip transitions at the top of the routes, and he gets a little bit loose at the top of the route. You're going to have to really manage his role. That's somebody that I think that you're going to have to make sure that he's going up against, the Gabriel Davises of the world, the 6'1", 6'2" plus outside receiver. He's a matchup corner. He's not somebody that's just whoever the number one is, regardless of skill set, we're going to throw him at that guy, right? It's not that easy of a translation for Elam. So if I had to pick out of this group, I am starting to gravitate a little bit more towards Kyler Gordon than I thought I would. Really complete profile. But I still can't unsee some of the things I saw on tape with Andrew Booth Jr. That guy can just really get after it. I've used the Jair Alexander comparison before. I think that's a really good one. I really like him as well. All right, last one here, and then we have some predictions of what's going to happen tonight before we wrap this up. Offensive line. I have definitely been on the record that I don't want the Patriots to go guard. I'm not swooning over any of these tackles either, but we have to at least acknowledge the fact that this is a possibility, Alex, in the first round for obvious reasons. No more Shaq Mason, no more Ted Karras on the interior. You need to start thinking about the next steps on the tackle position. Trevor Penning there at number one in the OT rankings there. He could go top 10. Like, there's some weird Seattle number 9 buzz with Trevor Penning. I don't know if Trevor Penning is going to make it to 21. And a lot of that has to do with the testing, right? I mean, he tested incredibly well at the combine, Senior Bowl guy. A lot of teams in the top 20 have been linked in the last 24, 48 hours to Trevor Penning. And I just hate the idea of taking Bernard Raymond in the first round. It's no offense to him, but a 25-year-old rookie with 18 career starts on the offensive line, I think that that's a really rich pick to pick at 21. Who are you liking out of this list, though? And we can talk about the guards. It's going to kill me, but we can talk about the guards.
Yeah, well, so then the interesting thing becomes if Penning falls, would the Patriots move up for Charles Cross? Right? And would they see that as the value if he moves down? I agree with you. I like Penning better just because I think tackle's a long-term pick and Raymond's going to be, a 26-year-old rookie? 25, 26?
25-year-old rookie, yeah.
I do like you move Daniel Falele up. I know we were both kind of out on him at the Senior Bowl. The more time that's gone on, I think he's a fit. In terms of the guards, yeah, I would agree with your top 3. I think Kenyon Green's the better player. And I think they both could give you some tackle versatility. They're both basically guards. Sawyer, to me, is the guy on this list that really interests me. And not at 21, but he could come in. He could play guard this year. He potentially could move out to tackle. Georgia guy, played really well in the college football playoff, which they look at. How do you do late in the year? How do you do against
Aiden Hutchinson? Yeah.
He erased both Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo. I mean, he was a big part of that because they tried switching sides late in that game, and he took Ojabo away too. That's something that the Patriots circle on their draft board, right? This guy took out the player who everybody thinks is the best player in the draft.
Yeah.
Honestly, if they go like your 2 third-ranked guys there, if they grab those 2 guys on day 3, interesting. I think like that's an interesting combo, right?
Yeah.
So
a lot of versatility.
Sawyer to me is a guy who I think is, and I know you wanted to talk about the first round, but I think you covered it. I agree with you on most of it. Sawyer is a guy who has not been talked about enough in relation to the Patriots. He really hasn't. When they pick him, everybody's going to be like, how did we not see that coming? It makes a ton of sense.
We've talked about him a decent amount, not to pat ourselves on the back, but we've talked about Sawyer a decent amount. Look,
so I think part of the reason too, and I guess this is where it gets interesting. A lot of the projections right now have him going in the 60 to 70 range. Patriots are picking at 54 and 85. He's somebody, whether it's moving down, moving up, they probably have to trade or reach extremely to get him. I think they would do it. I think he's the kind of guy they'd move for. And that's probably why he hasn't been talked about a lot because he's not like traditionally in their range. But yeah, he's a guy that's a name Patriots fans should know.
So Zion Johnson feels to me, if they end up coming away from tonight with Zion Johnson, it feels to me like nothing else went their direction, right? Like they didn't get, like Quay Walker gets scooped up by Houston at 13 out of nowhere. And maybe all the wide receivers are gone at that point. And like they have to make a pick at 21. They can't trade out of it. They got to do it. Their back's up against the wall. And at least Zion Johnson's a clean prospect, right? Guys clean. You know you're going to plug and play him at left guard, and everything is going to be fine with him. And he's, you know who he is. And I guess there's some benefit to that. I just hate the idea. Like, what I keep coming back to with guard and with Zion Johnson is just, how does Zion Johnson help you against Buffalo? Like, if you're in a game against the Bills, does Zion Johnson make you anywhere closer to Buffalo than you were yesterday? Like, the answer just is no. Like, if you were in a division, let's say they were in the NFC West and you had to go through Aaron Donald twice a year, and that was like the guy you had to stop, right? Then, okay, fine. But are you that afraid of Ed Oliver that he's going to wreck your entire day by not having a premium guard at that spot? I just think that you make no headway whatsoever by drafting Zion Johnson with Buffalo, and I would even say with Miami to a degree as well.
I guess let me ask you this. Let's say they move back and they get him at like 32, and then they also had a top 100 pick.
It helps me stomach it better. But I still just don't think I don't think you've moved the needle. Like, I don't think you've gotten any better. I would just so much rather them take a player on defense that could actually help you against Buffalo. Like, I just don't see how beating Buffalo or beating Cincinnati or beating Kansas City, like, no matter what team you have to go through in the AFC, how does drafting a guard in the first round help you keep pace with Justin Herbert and the Chargers in the playoff game next winter? Or Buffalo or Miami or whatever, you know?
Right. I said this on Felger and Maz today. I think if they have a more big picture approach to it, right? Let's say whatever it is. Okay, so like let's say they move down, right? Let's say they move down. They take Kenyon Green or Zion Johnson. Evan, you're ready to go lick a shopping cart, all of that, right? And then they come back tomorrow. They move up in the second. They get Quay Walker, and then they get John Mechie. That's a really good draft all of a sudden. Yeah. That's a really, really good draft. And that's
it's a good draft because of what you did on day 2.
Right. But the point is, if you feel like you can get those impact players on day 2, and this year more than any other year, there's impact players on day 2. You got to remember, this guard class kind of sucks. It just kind of does. And whether if you want to knock them for opening the need, the
tackle class is not good either, to be honest with you. After the top 3 tackles,
so if I'm being honest with you, if there's, let's say they move back, right? None of this at 21, but if they move back, I'd rather Kenyon Green or Zion Johnson at 29, 30, 32 than Bernard Raymond. I really would. Because those guys
can agree with you there.
So that's what, like,
it's the one I'll
if
give
they
you.
say, okay, we need a linebacker, we need a yak receiver. We know we can get either Quay Walker, Chenal, or whoever, right? We know we can get one of those guys on day 2. And we know we can get John Mechie. Let's just get the guard here. Let's just check that box off. It's the only chance in the draft we're going to have to check it off. And I'm not saying this at 21. I'm saying this at, down in the 30s if they trade back. You got to, and again, we got to do a show today, right? We'll come on tomorrow. We'll rip it. This draft is set up so weird. This draft is set up super weird. There's a way it could happen. Although, and somebody points out in the chat, and this is true, there is a very little shot they take a guard in the top 40. In the last 10 years, actually, if you go back to 2011, so a little more than 10 years, they have taken only 3 offensive linemen in the top 100. And they were, so they took Joe Thuney, 84, which maybe, like that, I think is about right if they want to take a guard. If Sawyer falls or Ryan or Parham from Memphis, right?
Yeah.
The only other guys, they took Antonio Garcia with their top pick in 2017, which was a 3rd-round pick, to be the future offensive tackle to replace Nate Solder. He obviously didn't work out, and they moved up and they took Isaiah Wynn in the 1st round the next year. Like I'm kind of saying this about the guard, and then you get Walker and Mechie. Like, I'm more just saying that as a discussion point. I don't think it happens. History tells us they're not going to take a guard before, I think 85 is the earliest they would take a guard.
And this is to me, the value with guard is in that range, right? That 85 to 140.
It's 2 players. It's 2, maybe 3 players. It's not
Zach Tom. It's Luke Gadecki. I think Sean Ryan will probably ultimately be in that like fringe top 100 range as well. I think there's some good guards in that spot. Like, I think you can get guys that can play for you right away. And that's what I'm more concerned about. They just need a starter at guard. They don't need him to be John Hanna, right? Like they don't need him to be Zach Martin. They don't need him to be Quentin Nelson. They just need a guy to start at guard for the next 4 or 5 years. That's what they need to be after in this draft. And I still think you can get that later. And we're going to welcome in our other cohort here this weekend, John Zanis. Hello, John. Thanks for waiting.
Send in the clowns, huh?
Yeah, right. We're 4 minutes away now from at least the start of the broadcast of the draft. I think we're a little bit further away from the actual draft itself.
Well, I was going to ask you guys a couple questions before we let Alex go, because I know he's got 98.5 responsibilities. You kind of teased it a little bit here, but the picks you least want to see, and for you, and yes, what? Who did that?
What?
Who did what?
These movements. Who made you big?
I didn't touch
He's been doing it all night.
Don't do that.
I didn't touch anything.
So Zion Johnson is your nightmare pick, Evan. Alex, do you have one either nightmare pick or position that you don't want to see? And I understand your rationale. First off, yes, draft a guard at 84, not 21, please. I understand your rationale behind trading back, getting a quality player, and loading up on day 2, though I tend to agree with Evan. Day 2 is what makes that draft, not the day 1, but whatever. A starter is a starter, so fine. If you get one, you check that box. I think historically the Patriots have clearly shown if there's one thing they do really, really, really well, it's draft interior offensive linemen later in drafts. But what's your nightmare pick, player, or position if they stand pat at 21, Alex?
So I'll go a little outside the box here. I'll give you my nightmare pass. My nightmare pass is if Chris Olave is on the board.
Right. That's going to happen, by the way. One of the receivers you guys want is going to be there at 21.
So why do we have to talk about it like that?
And then they're not going to take him, and that's going to happen. Prepare for that.
Jameson Williams, Jordan Davis, I would also categorize as nightmare passes if somehow Stingley falls, because that's been discussed. The one that's semi-realistic is Olave, and I'll tell you this. If they pass on Chris Olave, we are going to hear about it for a decade. That is going to be the next. We've heard about N'Keal Harry for 4 years. That's about to no longer be a talking point. He's not going to be here. All that airtime is going to get replaced with, remember when they could have had Chris Olave and they passed on him for whoever, right?
Yeah.
That's the nightmare to me. I think with what they do on day 2, day 3, they could justify other moves, even if they're not ultimately the best. Passing on Olave, that would be tough. Or I'll say this, taking Treylon Burks if he's the last receiver, that would be tough.
So wait, you do or do not want to take Treylon Burks at 21?
I would rather not. I just
rather not.
Now, that would be N'Keal Harry 2.0.
Why are you so polite about it?
So here's my next question. If either Olave or Jameson is available at blank, you move up to get him. But where?
So I don't think Jameson Williams is going to be available where they can realistically
Everyone
move
seems
up.
to have him gone by 15. So yes, but let's just say if one of those two is there in the 15, 16, 17 range, do you do what it takes to move?
So Williams, absolutely. I would move up if you can maybe get a deal done with Houston at 13 for Williams. Olave, I would say 15, 16, 17. And me and Evan have done this, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah.
The way the board looks right now, to move into 15 to 19 is super difficult. It's going to be crazy expensive. I might do it for Olave, Davis, Williams. Those are the 3 players. That's probably it. And I still, you might I wouldn't give up a future first if I'm them.
Yeah.
Because they need another playmaker next year. And you might have to do that to make that move.
Do you guys cut receiver at Olave? Is that it?
In the first
beyond that, is there anyone you take where the Patriots are drafting? Any of the other ones, Dotson, Watson, Burks, any of the other names that you hear?
At 21, no. If they move back to 30, 32, maybe you could talk to me about Jahan Dotson there, because you have another top 100 pick now, but not at 21.
So the issue with the issue with passing on receiver at that point is you have Dallas, Green Bay, and Kansas City, and they may not stay there. But those 3 teams are almost
going to take something.
At least take one of the.
Green Bay's got 2 picks. They're taking a receiver with them.
I think Kansas City probably will too after trading Tyreek Hill. So now you're talking about really getting down the board at wide receiver. At the time the Patriots get to 54, maybe if you're lucky, John Mechie is still there at 54, and you can pull the trigger on that. But now you're getting into like the Khalil Shakurs and the Danny Grays and like that kind of range of the draft. So if you want a premium wide receiver, then I think that you do have to start to think about it, because once you get past the first round, once you get out of the first round, the real blue chip guys are going to be off the board at that point.
And that's my thought. If you like him at 21, there's not a big difference liking him at 27 or 28 if you think he's going to come in and be a contributor for you right away in a position of need. Before Alex goes, real quick, let's get the predictions.
Yes.
Who are the Patriots taking? Evan, we'll start with you. If they stand pat at 21, what are they doing here?
Okay, so I got a little bit of a surprise. Alex covers what I think my brain is telling me is going to happen here tonight. I want to go with a little bit bolder with my prediction. I was texting with somebody in the league earlier today, and he was the first person to point out to me that the Patriots could go wide receiver. The very first person. Everybody else told me linebacker, defense, guard, Zion Johnson. The one person that told me wide receiver, and I'm like, everybody thinks they're going defense. Maybe they are actually going wide receiver, right? Like maybe that's actually the sneaky pick here. So I looked at the board. I think the one guy that's available that makes sense for them skill set wise, all that kind of stuff, is Jahan Dotson from Penn State. How bizarre would it be in a bizarre draft if Bill Belichick in the first round took a wide receiver from Penn State? Those are two things that he just doesn't do very often.
Right.
So that's my kind of bold prediction of what's going to happen here tonight. Patriots go wide receiver. I named Jahan Dotson here just because I think Olave, Jameson Williams, Garrett Wilson, I think those guys will all be gone, Drake London. So you're kind of taking the fifth wide receiver on the board, which for me would be Jahan Dotson.
All right. And Alex, what do you have them doing today in round one?
In Matt Groh, I trust. I have them trading down a little bit, staying in the first round though, and taking Quay Walker. I think that's what I had. I honestly don't remember what I had on the graphic.
Yeah.
That's what I had. Good. I've had like 6 different predictions today. It's been a crazy day, moving pieces. I think they trade back, stay in the first round. They want that 5th-year option. They value that 5th-year option. They take Quay Walker, and then they'll have 4 picks on day 2. And I think Matt Groh goes nuts with that and saves the franchise.
So, Alex, before we let you go, because you mentioned Matt Groh's name a couple of times, do you think this is Matt Groh's board? Because I think that really matters. Like, if it's Matt Groh's board, then I think that we could see some things that are a little bit different than what we've seen in the past. But if it's Bill's board, I don't really think I think we might see Zion Johnson. Like, I think we might see the whole guard.
Evan, I've been an in Bill we trust guy since I grew up 5 minutes from Gillette Stadium. So let me say this emphatically. In Groh, I trust.
So now you're a Groh guy.
I think he's going to deliver tonight.
So do you think that,
you think Bill handed him the keys?
I kind of think
collaborative effort.
I kind of think that Bill's got.
I don't know what that means.
First round. Yeah. I kind of think Bill's got the first round.
So I think
I think after that, maybe he lets.
Here's what I think it is.
But
I think Bill knows what kind of player he wants. I think Groh has a better understanding of what the current college game is and can help better translate that to what Bill's looking for.
Especially based off of his press conference a couple of weeks ago.
So I think it's Bill says, go get me this guy. Like, go get me an athletic left tackle. Go get me, a 3-down linebacker. And Groh's just better at finding that guy because he grew up with the modern game.
So the last thing I'll ask you guys, does Bill's motto of best football player available, does that hold this year? I hate that stance. Honestly, no, I don't believe you should do that. I think you have to look at need and you have to look at value, which is why I'm so friggin' gaga over receiver, because I just don't think you get those opportunities outside of the first round at all to get that type of caliber impact player. But if Bill does the whole, I just drafted the best football player there, and they end up with like something that's redundant, like a safety,
They'll end up with Zion Johnson. I guarantee you at 21, the way the board will shake out, that Zion Johnson will be the highest rated guy on their board. Right?
If we're going just by like
evaluation.
So here's the comeback I always have to that. We took the best player available. Well, if we're just throwing everything away and it's talent related to position, they would draft only quarterbacks, kickers, and punters. Because true talent, those guys are usually the best players on the board in most spots. So then it's, well, no, but they value different positions differently. Well, so then it's not best player available. Now we're putting conditions on it. Best player available is a catch-all. You're drafting the best player for the situation for your team, which is no duh. That's what you do. They haven't been great about that because, like you said, they draft redundant guys. They bury them. They don't get time to develop. That's what happened with Winovich. I think that's what happened with Jameson Williams. If they don't play, they're not going to get better. And then you need them in 3 or 4 years, then they look like rookies. That's just the reality of it. So they were better about that last year. They drafted, for the most part, guys who would play, guys who would be impact players. Those can be the best player available. I trust they'll draft the best player available relevant to the situation. Or they'll take the best player available, period. We'll get Matt Araiza, the 21st overall pick, in the victory lap I take on Evan will end up in the Guinness Book of World
He
Records.
had to sneak Matt. I was hoping that we could wait until Saturday to talk about Matt Araiza.
Well, if we're talking best player available,
could we?
if Jordan Davis, Evan Neal, and Jameson Williams are all off the board at 21, Matt Araiza is the best, relative to his position, best football player in this draft at that point.
Just on that note, you made your point.
I'm just saying.
Talk to you later.
I'm just saying. John's muted.
Oh, we
Does he
can't
know
hear
he's muted?
John. I don't know why. But what about Jordan Stout? What about him?
We're getting cute. People need narratives. They're going to like Jordan Stout better. The Patriots are. I've come to terms with that. And I like Jordan Stout. But
yeah, so you're a Jordan Stout guy, though.
I know. I like both of them. I think people can't wrap their heads around the concept of a punter having upside. And I think that's where they get lost with Araiza. He's only been doing this for a year. He's going to get better. Like, we don't talk about that with kickers and punters. We don't talk about upside with kickers and punters. Araiza has upside.
So I think the biggest difference in that, we're really off the rails talking about the punters in the first round. What I see,
John's got to get his crap together.
Yeah, and I'll admit it that I'm counting on other people to tell me about punters. I'm by no means a punter scout here. The one thing I'll say about it, though, is from what I understand is that Stout is a more situational punter, right? Like if you need to pin a team deep, kicking on your side of the 50, like the Patriots kill me and do so often, like that, then Stout might be more of your guy. When you're on your own goal line and you need to flip field position, that's Araiza's territory, right? Like he's the 80-yard punt guy.
But at the same time, so people worry about Araiza with the touchbacks. I think he'll learn to control that just because, again, he's only been doing it for a year. He'll fix it.
Fair enough. All right. We got John back now.
Right.
I think I just pulled the plug on my mic. I hadn't muted.
Okay.
You can hear me all right?
Yes, we got
you guys in good hands?
We're in good hands, Alex.
Hardly,
right,
but yeah.
We'll all tomorrow.
We'll do our best. Thanks, Alex Barth. Make sure you check out Alex Barth over at 98.5. Tons of draft coverage. He's been working his ass off over there. He'll be having updates throughout the night and a ton of written stuff over there. So again, make sure you check out Alex's written work, and we'll talk more draft tomorrow.
Have a good one, guys.
Thanks, Alex. Just teasing ahead what we're gonna do here, Evan and I. We're gonna hang out and go for a pick or so here, just to see if there's any crazy surprises. And then what we're going to do, we're going to pop back on maybe a few picks before the Patriots take their 21st selection. And we'll talk you all the way through that, the anticipation, best players remaining at that point. We'll evaluate the pick. I'll cry. Evan, maybe too. We'll see about it. And then, we'll be back tomorrow with a ton more coverage for sure. Should the Patriots trade up, we will jump up immediately and start reacting to that if there's news of that. So again, as soon as there's anything related to the Patriots going on, you guys can head right back here. We already have another stream scheduled. You can see it on our YouTube channel. If you haven't already subscribed, turn on your notifications. You'll be notified when we go live. We're projecting that to be in the 10:30 range, right, Evan?
Yeah, between 10:30 and 10:50 seems to be like the sweet spot of when exactly it happened last year. So right around between 10:30 and 11, I would say, is where we're going to be at.
So so that's what we're at. So we'll jump on there, like I said, around pick 17, 18, just kind of see what's left. By that point, as we said, all of Evan's favorite receivers could be gone, at which point you could be in kind of Jahan Dotson territory. Now, is he the only one past Olave that you would consider taking at this point in the first round? You did not love Burks, and I saw on your big board he was you wrote about him late because you went back and you looked at more tape. You started to like him a little bit more than you thought. He's a guy people are very split on in terms of where he falls. Some people think he's a second round talent. Some people think he's firmly in that area where the Patriots are picking.
It's a really difficult evaluation because there's so much A.J. Brown to his game, but then there's also so much N'Keal Harry to his game. So it's like, which way does he go? Because quite frankly, those two players coming out, A.J. Brown and N'Keal Harry, weren't all that different in terms of their profiles. It just that little bit extra speed that A.J. Brown has over those two guys. The fact that A.J. Brown was like a mid 4.4s guy instead of a low 4.5s guy made all the difference in the world in his NFL career. And that's the difference between having a perennial Pro Bowler in A.J. Brown and having a bust of a first-round pick like N'Keal Harry. Treylon Burks' 4.55 40-yard dash scares me. I know everybody puts out there, oh, well, he's got build-up speed, or watch him run away from Alabama's defense here, right? And all that kind of stuff. Build-up speed's all well and good, but so much of the NFL and so much of the wide receiver position is what you can do in the first
10 yards. Yeah.
Right. How you get off the line of scrimmage, if you're sudden, if you're quick, if you're explosive.
This is what killed N'Keal. He literally couldn't get off. He couldn't get off the line.
And I see the exact same issues with Treylon Burks as the Jaguars are now officially on the clock. So I see the exact same issues with Treylon Burks as the suddenness, the quickness, the initial burst off of the line of scrimmage. None of that is there. So it's all well and good that he can run by people 50 yards down the field after the catch, and he can run with it when they get him on end arounds and jet sweeps and stuff like that, and they get him moving before he gets the ball in his hands. He can pick up speed. But in terms of that sudden acceleration, it's just not there for me. And that's why I didn't have him on my board, because ultimately it's fool me once, right? Like, if fool me once, then you that's on you, right? But fool me twice, it's on me. If I'm the Patriots and I double down and I take Treylon Burks a couple years after taking N'Keal Harry in the first round, how did you learn, right? Like, did you evolve as a team at all from an evaluation standpoint? Absolutely not. Like, that's just more of the same mess that you got yourself into in 2019.
Now, you said you talked to someone today. That's the first time you kind of heard the whispers of the receiver thing. Yeah. And again, Patriots, as much as anybody, and this is part of the game, the misdirection is everything. You don't want people to know where you're going, what you're doing. And that totally makes sense. But, is there any chatter outside of that that you hear around the Patriots, just in terms of they really love this guy? And I know everyone keeps pointing back to, you keep seeing them tied to the same people. You see Devin Lloyd coming up a ton. You obviously see the guard there from BC that we've talked about a good bit. Anything that, like, the thing you're hearing the most, you can't get out of your ears? So
there's two things. One is absolutely the elephant in the room for everybody that you talk to about the Patriots. The giant, 2-ton elephant in the room is the fact that their wide receiver room is a lot worse than a lot of teams' wide receiver rooms, just especially at the top. I think more teams, more people you talk to have come around to their depth. Like, they have good 2 through 4, right? Especially after the Devontae Parker trade. You have Parker, you have Kendrick Bourne, you have Jacoby Myers. Like, those guys, I think people feel nice.
Aguilar, I guess, is still a person.
Category. Yeah, Aguilar in that depth category. They don't have it, and I don't think either one of the tight ends, Hunter Henry, I had a great year last year. And
realistically, you're probably saying they have 3. They have a bunch of 3s. Not even, I don't even know that you have a well-defined number 2.
Yeah, I think Devontae Parker is probably closest thing that they have to it, at least on paper. But yeah, that's the thing, is the tight ends they're good, solid players. Hunter Henry's a good, solid NFL tight end, but he's not a difference maker. He's not a game changer. So when teams game plan for the Patriots and they get into their meeting rooms on Monday as coaching staffs and they say, who are we circling on offense? Who are we circling on offense? Like, you know what I mean? Like who scares anybody on offense? Who are they going into their defensive meeting rooms on the next day on Tuesday with the game install, and they're saying, if we don't shut down player X, we're screwed, right? Like, there is nobody in that room for the Patriots like that. So that's the big elephant in the room. That's why I kind of got on the wide receiver thing here earlier today from my source. The other thing that I hear a ton about is the connection between Bill Belichick to the Georgia program and, in general, this, and I talked about this with Alex, this gravitas of the Georgia defense, right? This, like, that's the way that modern defense is going to look like. You're going to put a bunch of these ridiculous athletes on the field together. You're going to play a lot of lighter boxes, 2 high sets with the safeties. You're going to load up on your defensive line, have big dudes like Jordan Davis and Devontae Wyatt and Trayvon Walker, and you're going to be stout up front, and you're going to play the defense inside out. And that's the Georgia thing. And the other thing I would say about Georgia is all of them bought in to that defensive system, right? They all bought in and they sacrificed their own stocks in a lot of ways. And we're about to find out who the Jaguars take at 1-1. If Trayvon Walker doesn't go with the first pick, he probably does go with the first pick if he goes to Michigan, right? Like, because he probably has 15 sacks last year in the Big Ten with Michigan. Right. So they sacrificed their own personal gain and their own personal stats to win a national championship. So that kind of character from the Georgia defense too. And then you also get to the Bill and the Matt Patricia connections of it. The Patriots have always drafted guys from Georgia. Matt Patricia has a really good relationship with Kirby Smart. They go way back.
And the pick has been tipped, Evan. It is Walker.
So it is Trayvon Walker. So this is an interesting pick to me because I don't think in my time covering the draft that I have ever seen a more projection-based first-round pick. Trayvon Walker at Georgia had 9.5 career sacks over 3 seasons of full-time play at Georgia. That is it. Now, everybody that would listen to him, Kirby Smart went around and he obviously advocated for his guys. And everybody that would listen to him said, we are a gap control defense. We talk about this with the Patriots all the time, John, where they're not a pin your ears back defense, right? They're not a defense that allows guys to go after each other or go after the quarterback. That's Georgia too. They're gap control. They're all about pocket integrity and keeping these scramblers at bay and all that kind of stuff. So if he is in a different system, that's the hope that Trayvon Walker in a different system
let loose can do.
Different cat. But the problem is you're expecting a 9-sack guy in college to essentially be a 15-sack guy in one season in the NFL just off of traits, just as off of strictly off the fact that he is built in a lab to rush the passer.
Right.
And we'll see. Like, I don't, there's a lot of projection here. I understand why they go with him. He's bendier. He's longer. He's more explosive than Aiden Hutchinson. He moves better than Aiden Hutchinson.
But Hutchinson's production was off the charts. So, I mean, again, it was an interesting quandary here. You think Hutchinson clearly goes 2 here to Detroit?
So
there's some real interesting conversations you keep having about there could be some wild cards coming up here.
So the one wild card I'll give you with Detroit, their GM, Brad Holmes, apparently went to 2 college football games the entire college football season in the fall. Both of those games were at the University of Oregon, scouting Kayvon Thibodeaux. So,
and again, I heard Thibodeaux as well with massive buzz coming up to 2. There are some drafts where you see Thibodeaux going, I mean, well outside the top 10.
Yeah. So Kayvon Thibodeaux, if we had drafted 2 months ago, before the combine, before the pro days,
he was a preseason top-rated prospect, and yes,
he was the number 1 pick in the draft.
Yeah, exactly.
Coming out of the college football season. So, as much as I think Hutchinson's tape is more polished than Kayvon Thibodeaux, Jacksonville just made the decision to go with the trade-based prospect too. So I could definitely see Detroit going that direction. The one thing I think holds me back with Detroit going Kayvon Thibodeaux is, doesn't Dan Campbell just feel like an Aiden Hutchinson kind of guy? Like, that's like, we're going to blow your kneecaps off.
Right.
Like, that's the blue-collar, lunch-pail, like, hard hat team, right? And if that's the case, then Aiden Hutchinson's their guy. So we'll see.
All right. Where else in the draft? And I'm looking at one source here from The Athletic that it is Hutchinson.
Yeah.
Yep. He's a Lion. Staying home. He's a Lion. Yep.
Yeah. I think Dan Campbell gets his way here with Aiden Hutchinson.
That was quick. They turned that card in a minute. So obviously they love this. They love this player, and they're thrilled to get it. I mean, they were in terrific position here, really, because
not a good draft to have the number 1 pick.
Yeah, because you're pretty thrilled at 2, 3. You know, there's the 4 in the same regard, and it really was a kind of a coin flip here. So That's it right there. Hutchinson goes second overall. Where do you think you start seeing big surprises, if at all?
So here at number 3, I think could be a slight surprise to Houston. I've heard a lot of Derek Stingley buzz to Houston.
Yep.
And there, maybe like a week ago, Derek Stingley falling out of the top 10 was a possibility. Like Mel Kiper was talking about it on his conference call last week, that he wasn't 100% sure that Derek Stingley would go in the top 10. So I think that might be a little bit of a surprise. I've also heard
Kuiper's last mock, he had him at 9, but yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you've seen him up there as high as 3, right here in this spot.
So they also pick again at 13. And from everything that you hear, the ideal draft for Nick Caserio is Derek Stingley and Evan Neal, the tackle from Alabama. Being able to get both of those guys out of these 2 picks is pretty much their goal, right? That's kind of what they want to do here. So I think it all depends on which guy they think has a better chance at coming closer to 13. And in my mind, I think that that's probably Stingley at this point, just because Carolina's thinking tackle, Seattle's thinking tackle. So at that point, you think that at least 2 out of the 3 top tackles are gone. And I think the Giants easily could take tackle with one of their 2 picks as well. So I have a tough time thinking that Evan Neal gets anywhere close to 13. Derek Stingley, on the other hand, they talked about it earlier today that Houston could potentially move up from 13 and jump back up. Maybe that could be where they are able to find a spot and get Derek Stingley. So I kind of lean a little bit more towards the tackle here, just because of the way the board is going to shake out with the tackles. The top 3 tackles are all going top 10. So it's really a matter of if you can get all these guys or not.
Yeah. Yeah. Were there, I don't know if you and Evan discussed it, but there's the whole quarterback situation here. Do you think the way the draft is being discussed right now, which quarterbacks are going to fall well out of the top 10 and maybe be taken in the teens or lower, and may only be 1 taken in the entire first round, you think that's accurate? Or do you think teams are going to get jumpy and we'll see more quarterbacks than you think?
This is an awful quarterback class. It really is awful. I think the biggest problem that you see with this quarterback class is there's not a single one of these quarterbacks that I could tell you is going to get a second contract as a starting QB. It's really that bleak that I just, if I'm a team, if I'm the Giants, if I'm Seattle, if I'm Houston, who's kind of waffling, I think, a little bit on Davis Mills and isn't 100% sure, what I'm doing in this draft is I'm taking my picks and I'm getting the best possible infrastructure that I can out of this draft, so that next year, whether it's Bryce Young or it's Phil Jakovich or it's a trade, right? Because we saw Russell Wilson moved. These quarterbacks are moving now, these veteran guys. Matt Ryan, Matthew Stafford last year. So if I'm these teams, I'm making my situation the best possible situation that I can, so that when the right quarterback comes along, we drop it in there. Now, where do we talk about quarterbacks? I would say maybe you can have that conversation with Carolina at 6. It doesn't sound like that's going to happen, but Carolina at 6 is possible for a quarterback. I would also say that the Saints are kind of lurking. They have those 2 picks in the teens. They could move up slightly and take a quarterback. And then I think Pittsburgh is the other quarterback team. And then maybe once the draft snakes back around to Detroit at the end of the first round at 32, maybe Detroit takes a quarterback at the end of the first round or the beginning of the second round, but not in the, obviously they didn't take them out at 2. So I think that's maybe where we're talking about quarterbacks going if we're going to have that conversation.
All right, Houston's on the clock. We'll hang through this pick and see what happens here. There's some intrigue behind it, just kind of curious to what happens. And then we'll probably, like I said, we'll skedaddle and we'll jump back on there when the Patriots are close. And we'll kind of count you all the way down through to there here.
It sounds like it is Stingley to Houston here with this pick.
They went with Stingley?
That's the Twitter rumor.
Stingley, it is. Yep, I'm seeing it as well. So Stingley goes. Yeah. Here's a corner. In terms of trade stuff, I don't know whether you and Alex talked about it, and we talked about Stingley a little bit too. But in terms of trades, the most likely, obviously, is the trade back scenario. But It seems like there's a few teams that would be potentially interested in doing that. The trade up scenario, you think it's just too expensive to get into the teens?
It's going to be expensive because the teams that are locked in, like Philly and New Orleans, they acquired those picks in that trade with one another for a reason. Like they have a purpose for those picks. The other thing that I would say is that Dallas, Jerry Jones wants to trade up, and I think Jerry Jones is going to kind of do whatever it takes, right? Like, I think that that's going to be a big thing about this too. It's very, very rich to trade up. I think the one thing that you could see is they could potentially trade up if it's a defensive player that not a ton of teams are like super clamoring for. Like it's not Chris Olave or Jameson Williams, right? They're moving up to target Jordan Davis, who might not quite have as much of a market as some of these wide receivers do. Then maybe it gets cheaper, but I don't ultimately see it happening. And Stingley is officially the pick, I think, now.
Yep.
Here at 4, and I am not going to be like, oh, no, I'm afraid of the Jets, because I'm never going to be afraid of the Jets. But Sauce Gardner from Cincinnati is a terrific scheme fit for the New York Jets. Like, that is a perfect marriage between.
And let's hang through the Jets too. And
that's the perfect marriage between player and skill set and scheme. So they run that Seattle 3 system. They run a lot of quarters. They run a lot of 3. He's, to me, Sauce's comparison is Richard Sherman. And who better to put in that solid defense, that Robert Saleh defense, than Richard Sherman 2.0? Like, it's that scheme. It's that fit. It could be somebody like a tackler or Kayvon Thibodeaux. I've heard some murmurs that they're not really sure if Mekhi Becton is going to be a part of their long-term future. He's been injured. He's work ethic concerns, that sort of thing. But I just can't see Robert Saleh passing here on Sauce Gardner, because that's just such a slam dunk in terms of scheme fit and in terms of player profile as well. I have no problems with Stingley going ahead of him, by the way. I talked about this, and Alex and I have talked about Stingley. We've both been on the Stingley CB1 train. Stingley got bored in college, and I almost can't blame him for it. In 2019 with Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, they win a national championship. He has the best tape of any corner in the entire college football as a true freshman. He's the best corner in college football at 18, 19 years old. And then because of the ridiculous rules that the NFL have, he's got to hang around at LSU for 2 more years until he's draft eligible. Like, how do you blame the kid for just like kind of going through the motions at that point? LSU lost all their guys on offense. They didn't have a quarterback. Their team stunk. They weren't competing in the SEC anymore. He'll get back. Like, now that he's in the NFL, he'll be the guy that was the guy in 2019. Like, he'll be that player again. He'll just flip a switch and the light will go back on. The things that you saw on tape with him were just complacency. Like, he knew he's a dude. He knows he's a stud. He knows that he's already going to be a top 5 pick in the draft when he comes out. Like, I don't really blame him, for kind of more or less mailing it in over the last, I'd say, season and a half at LSU. So I totally get this. He's an absolute animal. Like, that guy's going to be a lockdown corner in the league. This is a slam dunk pick for Houston.
I think people in their evaluations might need to start getting used to that from college players too. Yeah,
I mean, we've seen it before. Like, I think the best comparisons are probably like Leonard Fournette or Jadeveon Clowney or players like that are, they have great sophomore or junior years, or freshman or sophomore years, but they have to wait until they're juniors to come out.
And they're like, what am I? Right. Exactly. Like, I could go top 5 now, but I can't. Right. So I'm not hurting myself. I'm going to go at I'm going to play at about 75% the rest of the way here.
Yeah.
And I get it.
Yeah. The NIL rules might help a little bit. Like, now that they can make some advertising money and stuff like that, it might help a little bit to get those guys to try a little bit harder. But it's such a shame because, like, Stingley, if you go back to 2019, the dude was just unreal. He was on another level, and that was as a true freshman, an 18, 19-year-old kid, just going out there and just shutting people down. So it's very clear that guy's going to be a terrific player.
Yeah, and again, like we said, Jets out here bleeding the clock. Everyone else had their picks in within the first couple of minutes. Not like the Jets are taking too much time.
Yeah. It's got to be Sauce. It's got to be Sauce. Gotta be the barbecue.
Gotta be the
He said he
sauce.
likes barbecue sauce as his favorite sauce, which is a little bit questionable. I'm not gonna lie. Like, I love barbecue sauce too, but it's there's I don't know if that's number one on my list.
There's better sauce.
Yeah.
Rank,
think-
while we wait for the Jets to pick, why don't you rank your sauces?
Oh man, that's tough. I don't know. I just for me,
You
like
got to go with Hollandaise number one.
there's no way that Sauce Gardner has any idea what hollandaise.
Oh, no,
Is.
that's the good stuff right there.
Yeah, hollandaise is not bad. That's a good pick.
That's got to
But
be
even
up
like
there.
some Italian sauces, right? Like
Yeah,
you got
sure.
ricotta, you got marsala,
Vodka sauce. Yeah, I
yeah,
like all of that.
Yeah, like all that stuff I think is better than barbecue. I'm sorry.
That's fine though. It's fine. It's if you're eating a lot of barbecue, I get it. That's about it. Like I said, we'll wait on the Jets here. Any other thoughts? I know you guys have been going for an hour. I don't want to get you to repeat yourself too much regarding the Patriots, but we are where we are, 21. And then more day 2 selections coming up. So we're going to do the same thing. Obviously, we'll do a pre-show and we'll kind of jump up heading into each pick in the same way throughout the next couple of days here, and just kind of keep you guys informed. Evan will have a ton of coverage on CLNS Media and our YouTube channels after the fact, so make sure you check that workout over there. You subscribe to everything, and Evan will have you plugged in all the way through.
It is barbecue sauce himself.
Barbecue sauce, yeah.
It's Gardner. Like I said, like this is such a great just a great fit, a great scheme fit, and you see these two guys, Richard Sherman and Amon Gardner are just
great poupon. That's not a sauce. Does that count as a sauce? Go ahead. Sorry.
It's a great comparison in terms of what Sauce Gardner is capable of doing, and you put him in that Seattle style system with Robert Saleh. And they just got number one corner. And we talked about earlier the elephant in the room with the Patriots. Like, who are they drafting Sauce Gardner for to defend on the Patriots? Like, is Devontae Parker going to line up across from him? Is it going to be Nelson Aguilar? Like, this is what we're talking about. And as much as I am still very, very wary, because I was wary of Zach Wilson coming out. I wasn't super high on Zach Wilson to begin with. But outside of the Zach Wilson factor of it, like the Jets are also getting better as a team too. Like, you could definitely make an argument that the Jets have gotten better this offseason than the Patriots have so far. So I think you're better at quarterback. I think you're certainly better at coach, right? Like head coach, obviously have a huge advantage there. But at some point in time, like we're talking about Buffalo, Miami, the Jets I do think are getting a little bit better here. Like I think that they are improving. And we talk about the number 10 pick in the draft that they have here in a little bit. That could be going to San Francisco for Deebo Samuel. So if that happens, like
you think that's real?
That's definitely real. I think what will ultimately happen is San Francisco's got to see who's on the board at number 10.
And they have to love it. Yeah.
Right. If they have a guy there that they absolutely love, then that conversation I think becomes really easy. So you talk about Deebo Samuel coming now into the division and onto the Jets as well. Ultimately, you're just praying that Zach Wilson's bust, right? Like that's like if Zach Wilson's an above average NFL starter, then you got a problem in the Meadowlands too. So
that's how it goes with the quarterbacks. We just saw the Giants cutting bait on Daniel Jones, not picking up his 5th-year option. You got a couple of years to show, what you can do. And it is, obviously Wilson got thrown right into the fire and he definitely didn't look ready, but he's toolsy, as they say, Evan. And, there's a lot he can do. We'll see what he does, second year, maybe with a little bit more around him. Obviously, someone like Deebo Samuel would help. We're going to jump off, but do you see a tackle run coming here?
Oh, yeah. The fact that Evan Neal and Ike Ekwonu are still even on the board right now is great.
Carolina's got to be thrilled. They didn't have to do anything to get tackle.
If I'm Carolina, I'm crossing my fingers that Ike Ekwonu is still there at 6. I think the Giants might go Evan Neal because he's a little bit more polished, a little bit more battle tested, and it's kind of the safer pick for that new regime. But also Dable is an Alabama guy. So I think they might go Evan Neal. Ekwonu at 6 for Carolina is the dream. Like that's a dream pick. That guy is nasty. Like he is physical, explosive.
Yep.
Like, he's everything you want.
You mentioned the Jets trading for Debo, and that would be a big, splashy, high impact thing. You also talked about the Giants. Their first round pick last year, of course, was Kadarius Toney, and that went south super fast, and they're already shopping him. I know we've discussed this on CLNS Media. You and Alex, I'm sure, have talked about it as well. I don't know where you necessarily stand on him. I know a lot of it was let's just ask Joe Judge what kind of guy he is. But is there enough there? And at what point, if you were sold, that any character concerns or any issues or whatever it is that led the Giants to say, I don't want this guy on my team anymore, we're not anything to be concerned with, talent alone, what pick would you move for a player like that?
I think you start talking about it at 127.
That low?
Yeah, because I think the thing is that ultimately in the top 100, there are some really good wide receiver options for the Patriots that don't necessarily carry that kind of baggage, right? And you also have one more year of team control. Now, he has the fifth-year option, but you have to hope that he's good enough to want to pick up the fifth-year option if that's going to be the case. So what I've heard about Kadarius Toney, it worries me with the Patriots, because if you're not locked in New England and you're not all football and your drive is not there and your effort is not there, there's a lot of whispers about this kind of being an issue with N'Keal Harry at times, that his buy-in just behind the scenes hasn't fully been there, right? And if that's not there for you in New England, now Kadarius Toney is a terrific scheme fit. Like, he can play in the slot. He runs with the ball like he's like basically a running back playing wide receiver with wide receiver skill. He's great at the top of the route, super quick. Even when he got on the field with the Giants, like you saw it, like he played well when he was on the field and was getting targets. But I worry about that work ethic thing. So I look at 127 and I say, okay, well, would I rather have Kadarius Toney at 127 or John Mechie at 54? Like, maybe then I can kind of talk myself into the Kadarius Toney route a little bit more. The value of basically getting a top 50 talent in a draft for a non-top 100 pick. You can sort of sell yourself on it a little bit more. But for the Giants, they got this pick that I'm sure we'll find out here in a second at 5. 7, they come right back on the clock at 7. I think that pick's going to be Jameson Williams. And because why not, right? Like, you're going to take the tackle. You're going to probably go the safe route here at 5, and you're going to take the steady tackle and put him at left tackle and have him protect the quarterback. But what I just talked about with the QBs, got these teams not taking quarterbacks this year. What better situation for your quarterback next year? Let's say they draft Bryce Young or they draft a
tackle and receiver. Are you kidding?
Right.
A lot of quarterbacks fail because they don't have those two things coming in. So you're right. Whoever that quarterback is, when you're able to give him some sort of support system walking right into the league, it makes life a lot easier. How many quarterbacks we see, Evan, go out there and have absolutely zero protection in year one? It's you saw Wilson last year. You saw Burrow in his first year. It's just brutal. Even Burrow last year.
Yeah, so you have, in that case, you have Evan Neal protecting his blind side, and you have Jameson Williams as his number 1 wide receiver, and you drop the quarterback in, and then you also have Brian Dable, who basically worked with Josh Allen from the ground up to get Josh Allen to where he is right now. So you have the quarterback whisperer. Thibodeaux. This shocks me.
That's a shocker.
This shocks me. Now, that regime in Buffalo is a very big, they're all about athletes. Like the Bills are a big athletic testing program. Ed Oliver, Tremaine Edmonds, Josh Allen, like they're a traits-based program and how they scout and how they evaluate. So I get it from that perspective, but I think what's a little bit surprising is Dable, this is his first year. He's an offensive-minded coach, and he's letting them take a defensive player. So that's a little bit surprising to me, because if your whole thing, if you're Dable, is you got to make your offense work. Otherwise, you're probably going to get fired.
Well, now you're probably, but here's the thing though. Here's my rationale. They might have thought this guy was the player people thought he was when the season began, maybe the number 1 overall player on the board, and we're thrilled that he's there. Knowing at 7, you've still got one of the top 2 tackles. It's a real luxury position to be in. So now it's not surprising if they do come back, go offensive tackle rather than someone like Jameson Williams, which means again, pushing those receivers further down the board helps, if you're one of those people
you
who
worry
hopes the
about
Patriots can grab
Philadelphia.
it one.
You
Philly
worry,
seems to be the last stop,
you
for
worry
Williams.
about Baltimore too. I think ultimately Baltimore, they need to really seriously think about the fact that they need to have Lamar Jackson in the best possible position. And their receivers, they did draft Rashad Bateman in the first round last year. So maybe they don't think about receiver again just because of that. But I think ultimately you have to think about that. And I'm really surprised that this is the Giants taking Kayvon Thibodeaux. This is Joe Schoen, the general manager's pick. This means that Brian Dable said to Joe Schoen, go do your guy, right? Like, go take your guy, right? Like, I'm going to get out of the way, and I'm going to let the evaluators do the job. Because to me, if this was Brian Dable's pick, this is the tackle all the way.
Yeah.
Maybe they end up getting the tackle at 7, like you said. But now Carolina at 6, like, I have a friend down in Carolina that we talked a lot when Cam was the Patriots core. He must be doing cartwheels in his house right now.
Right.
That they have their pick of the litter at tackle.
Exactly.
Like, they're going to get the number 1 tackle.
They were drafting one no matter what, even if it was the 3rd tackle taken in this draft, and they get pick number 1 right now. So things fell beautifully if you're a Carolina Panthers fan.
Yeah. So this is surprising here for the Giants at 5. I would think that 7's a tackle, but when you take the pass rusher and you take the defensive player, like maybe they go with 2 kind of fireworks picks here and take Jameson Williams at 7. I think that's when the Jameson Williams conversation needs to start. I mentioned Baltimore at 14 with Lamar. They got to do something for Lamar. Seattle, I've also heard a little bit of 8 Drake London at 8 to Atlanta. That they might like Drake London a lot, the wide receiver from USC. So I think you're going to start to see some of these receivers come off. But if you're a Chris Olave fan, and I'm one of the biggest, right? I'm driving the bus with Chris Olave. We're starting to get into the territory where at least maybe that could be more realistic. Now, I still don't think it's a yes. I still don't think he gets there. But I think that ultimately there could be a possibility here that one of those wide receivers, whether it's Olave or Garrett Wilson, is maybe available.
And you did not love another polarizing one was Drake London, who you don't love at all. And
I am so surprised that so many people
have him as the consensus one, but
there's so many people that I really respect and trust in this media scout world, if you want to call us that, is telling me how wrong I am about Drake London. The biggest concern that I have about Drake London is twofold. One, he was playing against Pac-12 corners who notoriously stink. Like, N'Keal Harry looked great against Pac-12 corners too, right? Like, these guys are undersized. Like, he's going up against like the UW corners. Everybody's like, oh, look at his tape against UW. It's like, Kyler Gordon's 5'11". He's 6'4". Like, obviously he's going to be able to go up above him and make catches down the field. The biggest concern that I see with Drake London is he's not fast. He's just not fast. Like, he doesn't run by anybody. No NFL corner is going to feel threatened by Drake London's vertical speed. Like, no NFL corner is going to be like, oh, shoot, I better get out of dodge because Drake London's coming off the line of scrimmage at me. Like, that's just not happening. And you look at the yak ability, like the yards after the catch, and everybody's so high on that with him.
Right.
We've seen what that looks like with the mid 4.5s guy in the NFL. It's not, you can't go horizontal. You can't go sideline to sideline on a jet sweep at 4.55 the same way that you can in the Pac-12 when you're playing in the NFL. Guys are just too much. They're too fast. They're too fast. So slow off the line of scrimmage, slow in general. Big receiver. Like, I'm a full stay away from Drake London if I'm the Patriots. He's in the same category as Treylon Burks to me.
That's kind of the vibe I get there. We're close here. We might as well hang only to see if Carolina shocks the world and doesn't take a tackle. And then, as I said, we will jump off and jump back on probably, sooner than we think, because we're saying 10:30 for the Patriots, but we're cooking at a pretty good pace here. So we may be back a little bit sooner than that. And just see where we're at in terms of selections right now. But that's it. We have Panthers. Surprised they're taking this. Oh, the pick is in. We don't have it yet, though.
This has got to be Neal or Ekwonu. I think they end up going Ekwonu. Neal is more polished. Neal is kind of like, really steady, like solid tackle prospect. Aquanu, when you watch that guy, I mean, he is just absolutely nasty. Like, he is a finisher. He's athletic. He can get out in space and just bury guys. Like, if you want an impact tackle, like the guy that Aquanu reminds me of, there's two guys. One is Jason Peters. One is Trent Williams. Like, those are the two guys that he reminds me of. Evan Neal reminds me of more of just like, I can't really think of a great comparison off the top of my head, but just like a steady 10-year offensive lineman, right? Like, not anything like that's going to be like, oh, wow, like Evan Neal's like the best tackle in football. I think Aquanu's got much higher ceiling, maybe a little bit of a lower floor too. But yeah, I'm really high on Aquanu. So
Right.
I think Carolina would probably pick him if I'm them. But
I have to wonder if Carolina having their pick at tackle is they're fielding offers here. That's the only thing I could think of why they're hanging out, because if you know you can get a guy you like just as much at 8 as you will at 6,
right.
then maybe that's something you want to consider moving back for. So again, we don't,
because all of the premium defensive players with Thibodeaux going at 5, like I don't know who you're moving up for necessarily at that point on defense. And I think we're maybe still a little too early for the run at wide receiver. So I think that I think they're picking. Yeah, they decide, but they might have tried to field some trades. You're right. This did linger a little bit longer than the rest of the picks.
Yeah. But yeah, again, I am curious because at any point the dam is going to break here. It is Aquanu.
Yes.
Yep. Okay.
So there we go. First tackle.
Yeah.
They're doing absolute cartwheels in Carolina right now. They got the number 1 tackle. Yeah.
So I mean, you could see here with the Giants, you could see tackle because they didn't go in that direction at 5. You could see Garrett Wilson perhaps. The Falcons are always, I mean, you have to consider wide receiver is very likely an option for Atlanta. They're at 8, even though they have
Kyle Pitts. Yeah. I think that's 8
at amount of needs, but yeah.
I think 8 for Atlanta is Drake London. I do. Yep, I think that they are gravitating towards that skill set. Like they're going to have 2 huge receivers, right? Like guys like Pitts and Neal and Drake London, just 2 6'5" monsters, and I think that's kind of the goal there for them. The one thing that you will say, like I will say about Drake London, similar to Kyle Pitts, it doesn't matter how accurate your quarterback is because those guys' catch radiuses are just absolutely insane. Like they have great body control, great catch radius. Like they'll just pluck everything. So there's that advantage to it, I suppose.
Yep. All right. We are going to wrap it. And we will be back again, just reminding everyone that we are going to pop back up as soon as the Patriots are close to picking. And let's call it, what do you say, Evan? You want to come up around 17, 18?
Yeah, I think even maybe a little bit earlier than that, honestly, because, this board, the way that there's still 2 more tackles that absolutely need to go. Right, Neal and Charles Cross are going to go here soon. I think the top of the wide receiver run still needs to happen. Like, this could get interesting. Like, guys like Jordan Davis, like, where does he fit into this run? Maybe a team like Minnesota just takes the best player available. We also still haven't talked about Kyle Hamilton a whole lot. Like,
right.
He's still lingering too. Some people think he's the best player in the draft. So this could get a little bit interesting.
All right, we'll see. We'll see what kind of mood we're in. We're gonna hang up the phone here with no receivers off the board and feel good. Though none of us truly expected one to go this early. I do think somewhere around 8, you could start to see the first 1 or 2 come off the board. 8, 9, 10. I could see Atlanta taking one. I could see the Jets then again at 10, potentially dipping into the wide receiver pool. So we'll see what happens there. But we'll pop up. As we said, a few picks before. Subscribe to the YouTube channel if you haven't already. You'll turn on your notifications, or follow us at Twitter, either our individual handles here at EZLazar or at John_Zanis, or Patriots CLNS. We'll send out a notification on Twitter when we're close to coming back on and let you guys know, and then just hop on and we'll take you all the way through the Patriots pick. Until then, Evan, final thoughts before we wrap?
Draft's moving. That's a good thing, right? We're on pick 7 already, and we're only 40 minutes into it, so that's good. But yeah, the way that this is shaping up, I think that there's going to be a really good player there at 21 for the Patriots, and that's going to be exciting.
All
I
right.
don't know. I'm not ready to commit to who exactly it's going to be, but I think one of the guys that was in my top 10 tier on my big board is definitely going to be there.
Top 10, period.
Yeah. So it's going to be no. Top 10 for the Patriots.
Top 10 for the Patriots.
Yeah. I think one of those guys like, that maybe some people thought were, Jordan Davis or Chris Olave or Jermaine Johnson from Florida State or one of these players, Devin Lloyd. We'll see. But Trent McDuffie, I think one of these guys might be there after all, because now, like I said, we still got to have a bunch of tackles go. We still have to have the top of the wide receiver class go.
Yep.
We're starting to stack up a little picks here.
Yep. All right. So we'll see what happens. We'll be back in a little bit. As we said, the draft is moving, so we'll be back even quicker than anticipated. It says 10 o'clock here, but we'll probably be back before then. So we'll see you guys when we